This happened when I was about 10, maybe 11 years old, and I swear that every word still haunts me. I grew up in a small town in the interior of São Paulo, one of those where everyone knows everyone else and any news becomes a topic of conversation for months. At the time, I didn't understand much, but I remember well the worried expressions on the adults' faces when they talked about Marina Alvarez. Her name came up in the corners, like a whisper, something forbidden to discuss openly. Marina was a young university student studying philosophy. Many people thought she was different, always with her head in the clouds, but I remember my mother saying that she just saw the world in a very particular way. She lived a few streets down from my house, and despite being older, I would see her truck pass by every now and then. I only really understood what had happened much later. At the time, all I knew was that she had disappeared in a way that no one could explain. Marina didn't have an easy life. She lost her parents early, within a few years, and that changed her completely. She was never one to sit still, but after the losses, it seemed like nothing could hold her back. That's when she began her solitary journeys on the road, driving an old pickup truck inherited from her father. People in the city thought it was strange for such a young girl to travel alone, but she said it was the only way she could feel free. One day, Marina had a serious accident. She overturned her truck on a dirt road and spent months recovering. The whole town thought she would slow down, but the opposite happened. She became even more determined to leave whenever she could. The last time anyone saw Marina, she was at the gas station, filling up the tank alone, as usual. The next day, she disappeared. At first, the disappearance didn't seem like a big deal. It was just Marina being Marina. She would leave without warning, spend days or weeks on the road, then come back and everything would go on as usual. This time, though, there was something strange. She left a note for her sister and a friend. Something simple, almost cold. "I need to breathe. I'll be back soon." But she didn't. Her sister tried to contact her, but her cell phone went straight to voicemail. Still, no one panicked immediately until Marina's truck turned up overturned in a ditch on BR 318, an isolated road in the middle of the Amazon. This highway is known for being full of dark stories, truck drivers who disappear without explanation, reports of voices on the side of the road, people who swear they saw figures asking for a ride. In this macabre scene, her vehicle was there, but Marina was not. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood. It was as if she had evaporated before the car overturned. The strangest thing was that all her belongings were intact. Cell phone, wallet, clothes. If it was a robbery, why leave everything behind? The news spread, and the police began to investigate. But the more they investigated, the less sense it all made. They discovered, for example, that someone had tampered with the truck's engine, installing a mechanism that allowed it to accelerate without a driver. This made everything even more macabre. Was it a staged accident? To throw off who? To pretend that she had died there? Marina's sister was desperate. If it wasn't an accident, then what was it? Witnesses began to appear. A gas station attendant swore he had seen Marina the night before, talking to a tall man wearing a hoodie. He didn't hear what they were saying, but he noticed that she seemed uncomfortable. A truck driver reported seeing a black car following her truck closely on BR 318. Always at the same speed, without overtaking. That didn't seem like a coincidence. The police followed another lead. A mechanic named Renato had worked on her truck a few days earlier. Suspicions fell on him, since he knew about Marina's plans. But this theory didn't hold up. The fingerprints on the truck weren't his, and besides, Renato had a solid alibi. The investigation went completely cold. No new evidence, no additional witnesses, nothing. It seemed like the road had swallowed her up. The rumors gradually died down, and Marina ended up becoming yet another unsolved mystery. Her sister tried to reopen the case several times, but with nothing concrete, the police could not make any progress. Theories emerged. Some said she ran away to start her life over, that the note she left for her sister was a kind of farewell. But if she wanted to disappear, why leave everything behind? Others thought she was the victim of something much bigger, a crime that was never discovered. But no one knows. She simply disappeared. I still think about it today. At the time, I was just a child. But now, the more I think about it, the more sinister it all seems. What happened to Marina Alvarez? Is she still alive somewhere? Or did that BR-318 take her to a fate that no one will ever understand? Drivers who pass by there in the early hours of the morning say that they sometimes see a young woman walking along the shoulder. Always the same description: young, backpack on her back, staring into space. Maybe it's just a legend, or maybe the road never really let Marina go. Story 2. If there's one thing I've always feared in life, it's hitchhiking. Ever since I was a kid, after watching a terrible movie about a psychopath on the road, I've had that scene stuck in my head. But irony won out. My friend Rafael and I decided to travel around Brazil without any money, relying only on rides and the goodwill of strangers. He had experience, and he said that most people are good people and that macabre cases are rare. I actually believed it for the first 10 days because everything was incredible. Rides with nice people, funny stories, new friends. It almost became a dream adventure until that night. The rain started out of nowhere, hard, as if the sky was splitting in two. We were on the side of the road, exhausted, soaked, waving at every car that passed. But who would stop in that rainy darkness? Time was passing, and I was already considering setting up our emergency tent when we saw the light of a truck appearing. It slowed down and stopped next to us. The truck was big and old, with a loud, roaring engine and the bodywork covered in marks from past trips. At the wheel was a man of about 50, with a closed expression and a cold look in his eyes. Without saying anything, he gestured with his head as if to say, "Get in quickly." I didn't want to get in, but the rain and fatigue spoke louder. The cabin smelled of diesel oil and something I couldn't identify. The driver remained completely silent, his eyes fixed on the road. Okay, some people don't like to talk, but the radio, it was on, but it wasn't playing music or the news. It was just static, and that hissing sound gave me the creeps. I tried to break the ice. "Don't you like music?" No answer. I tried again, asking if I could pick up a station. Nothing. It was as if I were invisible. I looked at Rafael, waiting for a sign that he also found it strange, but he just shrugged. Inside, I was already uncomfortable. The heavy rain on the windshield, the hissing on the radio, and the silent driver created a nightmare atmosphere. Then I realized something. We were no longer on the main highway. Instead of asphalt, it was a dirt road, full of potholes, surrounded by dense forest. My stomach turned. "Hey, where are we going?" I asked. The truck driver answered without looking away. "I need to take a small detour." That was enough for the alarm to go off in my head. I looked at Rafael, but he was strangely calm. That irritated me. "Dude, did you notice we left the main road?" I whispered. He nodded and said, "Relax, if there's trouble we're two against one." I couldn't relax. Every minute made the place more claustrophobic, with no streetlights, no houses, no sign of civilization, just the dense forest and the eternal noise of static. "Sir, where are you going?" I tried again. No answer. I was already thinking about asking to get off when I saw something ahead. My eyes widened, a wooden church in the middle of nowhere with a crooked bell. Next to it, a small cemetery with dirty tombstones and fallen crosses. The rain was slowing down, and I noticed that not even crickets or birds could be heard. It was an otherworldly silence. The truck stopped in front of the church. The driver turned off the engine, got out of the cab, and went to the back of the truck. He pulled out 4 large black bags. My blood ran cold. Immediately, my head began to create disturbing images, sinister journeys, bodies inside bags. Everything flashed through my mind, racing like a horror movie. I tried to move, but my legs felt like lead. He walked to the church door, disappearing inside. I wanted to run away, but Raphael whispered, "Calm down. We don't know what's going on. If we run away, he might notice." I just wanted to disappear. Then the man came back. He climbed into the cab, started the engine, and said simply, "I just wanted to make a donation." He sped off as if nothing had happened. Raphael and I looked at each other, trembling. Could it be true? Donate what? Black bags in an abandoned church? The rest of the trip was dead silent. The sound of the rain was bothering me again, but I couldn't say anything. After about 15 minutes, the truck driver stopped at a gas station. He turned to us and ordered, "You can get out here." I didn't need to hear it again. We got out quickly, but not in a hurry. He stood still for a few seconds, his hands on the steering wheel, as if he was waiting for something. Then he gave me a strange look, which wasn't exactly anger or threat. It seemed like amusement. He smiled out of the corner of his mouth, a discreet smile, started the engine and drove off. We stood there, watching the truck disappear into the darkness, our hearts racing. Raphael sighed. Did we overdo it? I didn't know how to answer. If he wanted to do something, he would have. But why the detour? And what was in the bags? Maybe it was just donations to some isolated community. Maybe it was something much worse. I never found out. I still get a chill when I remember it. Story 3. It was late afternoon with an orange sky and an empty road. My best friend Luisa and I were traveling through the countryside of São Paulo, enjoying a few days off. There was a sense of freedom, loud music, junk food, and laughter. After driving around for a long time, we decided to stop at a typical roadside gas station, with a restaurant next door and a bunch of trucks parked there. While Luisa went to the bathroom, I stayed in the car waiting for the attendant to finish filling up. It was then that I noticed a guy standing near the convenience store, holding an undrinkable coffee. He wasn't playing with his cell phone. He didn't seem tired. He was just watching. And not just anyone, but 2 girls filling up on the other side. They were young, talking and laughing. However, his gaze was strange, analyzing their every move. A chill ran down my spine. Instinct is instinct. Luisa came back and I said, "That guy is looking at those girls in a weird way." She agreed, without hiding her disgusted expression. The girls finished filling up, got in the car and left. The man waited a few seconds, got in his vehicle and headed off in the same direction. I felt a weight in my stomach. "Girl, I think he's following them." Luisa's eyes widened. I couldn't prove it, but something told me that he was. Without thinking much, I started the car and said, "There's only one way to find out." I sped off. The guy was in a dark sedan. He kept a suspicious distance, sometimes speeding up, sometimes slowing down, but never passing. Suddenly he caught up to the girl's car and started flashing his headlights. My heart raced. He was forcing them to stop. I didn't know what to do, but I had to act. The girls started pulling over to the side of the road. They might think he was a cop or something. This was so wrong. So, without hesitation, I accelerated with my high beams on, approaching them, almost without thinking about the risk. He noticed me in the rearview mirror. Then he slammed on the brakes as if he had been startled. And then, suddenly, he accelerated and disappeared. The girls were still stopping, confused. I pulled over behind them, my heart racing. I got out of the car. The driver rolled down the window, eyes wide. "What was that?" I replied, breathless. "He's not a cop. He's been following you since the station." She and her friend exchanged frightened looks. My God, he yelled that he was the cop. I shook my head. "Real cops don't act like that," Luisa added. "You need to report it." The driver was shaking, took out her cell phone, but complained, "I didn't get his license plate." "I did," I said, almost in disbelief that I had memorized those numbers. I gave them the license plate, and they called the police right away. Still shaking, they said, "You saved us. What if we had actually stopped?" My stomach turned. It could have been horrible. After they spoke to the police, we stayed there for a few more minutes, trying to calm down. Then we each went our separate ways, but that story stayed with me. As we headed back to the road, Louisa broke the silence. "You did the right thing, friend." I nodded, still tense. How many times must this happen to other people? Fake police officers, ill-intentioned people on the side of the road. The dark night holds mysteries that we would rather never find. Sing story 4. I don't know if what I'm going to tell you seems like a lie to some people, but for those who believe it, thank you. I myself would rather not believe it. However, it happened. And to this day, every time I get in my truck to hit the road alone, this episode comes back to my mind. I'm Manuel Ramos, a truck driver for over 20 years. I've driven this country from north to south, and I know all the potholes and questionable stops. I've heard strange stories about ghosts and unexplained disappearances, but I never paid much attention to them. Until that night. It was a trip like any other, almost 2 a.m. A rural road, deserted, with no moon, just total darkness. The radio was off, and the truck's engine broke the silence, making me feel like the last man awake in the world. That's when I saw something on the road. I thought it was an animal, but as the headlights got closer, I realized it was a child. A boy, maybe 5 or 6 years old, standing right in the middle of the road. My heart almost stopped. I slammed on the brakes, the truck skidded. I got out of the cab in a cold sweat. The boy just stared at me, his skin very pale, his eyes huge. There was no one else. No house, no lights, just the wind in the woods. "Hey kid, are you okay?" I asked, my voice weak. He didn't answer, just murmured, "He's coming." A shiver went up my spine. Who's coming?" He slowly raised his arm, pointing into the darkness behind me. I turned my head but saw nothing, just pitch black and the swaying trees. Then the truck's radio began to crackle, out of nowhere, even though it was turned off. A crackling sound interspersed with murmurs, like someone was trying to speak. I turned back to look at the boy, but he was gone. Gone. My heart felt like it was about to jump out of my chest. It was then that I noticed a handprint on the side window, inside the cabin. That door was locked. How? I ran up and slammed the door shut. The passenger seat was soaked, as if someone had been sitting there just seconds ago. I touched the fabric. Dark moisture, a strange iron-like smell, like blood. My thoughts became chaotic. The radio then stopped crackling. A hoarse voice rang out, "You saw him, didn't you?" I almost screamed. I turned the radio off, but the voice continued. "You saw the boy, didn't you?" I felt desperate and tried to put the car in gear. 3 knocks came from the door. Knock, knock, knock from outside. I closed my eyes for a second, sweating profusely. I looked in the rearview mirror, and there was the same small silhouette with its back turned. I stepped on the accelerator with all my might. The truck pulled away. In the rearview mirror, the silhouette suddenly turned its face. My headlights flickered, then failed for a moment. Everything went dark. When the lights came back on, there was nothing there. I kept driving until I found the first gas station, shaking, barely able to breathe. When I finally stopped, I tried to find some sign of what had happened. The seat was dry, the radio was completely silent, no handprints on the glass. But I saw it, I felt it. To this day, whenever I drive through those parts, I never look at the passenger seat. And I pray that I never see that child standing in the middle of the road again. Story 5. I'm Jose Mauro, and I want to share my story here. My girlfriend is Brazilian and loves horror stories. She was the one who insisted that I tell them. It happened a few years ago when I had to travel to a city in the interior for work. The journey was long, and I'd been driving all day. At night, I was tired. The GPS stopped working, and it started to rain heavily, making it hard to see on the dark road. I slowed down and turned the wipers to maximum, but I could barely see. The road was deserted, with few signs and not a single living soul around. I felt isolated, not knowing exactly where I was. Then I saw a sign and pulled over to the side of the road to read it better. I turned on my hazard lights and leaned forward in my seat, trying to decipher what was written on the sign in the rain. That's when the passenger door suddenly opened. A man tried to get into the car without warning. My heart leapt into my throat. He was soaking wet, his clothes stuck to his body, but he acted as if he had every right to get in. He didn't ask for a ride. He didn't knock on the window. He just tried to make himself comfortable. Frozen with fear, I screamed and stepped on the gas. The door was still open, but the car took off. The man lost his balance and fell backward. My survival instincts kicked in louder. The rain was pounding on the roof, and I didn't have the courage to look in the rearview mirror. I didn't know if the guy was hurt, if he was armed, or if he was going to try again. I managed to close the door when I was already far away on a better lit part of the highway. I parked and took a deep breath. My hands were shaking so much that I could barely hold the steering wheel. Everything inside me was screaming to keep going as fast as possible. I continued on my way, still tense, praying that I would soon reach a city. It was only when I saw streetlights and buildings that I felt truly safe. I kept thinking, what if he had managed to get in? What if he was armed? That was the longest night of my life, and I learned my lesson. Never stop on deserted roads, especially in the rain. You never know who or what might come in through the passenger door. Story 6. Every young person's dream is freedom. For me and my friends, that freedom had 4 wheels and a full tank of gas. We lived in a forgotten little town in the countryside where there wasn't much to do. So as soon as I could afford it, I bought my first car, used but functional. And so the idea of the great trip to Bahia came about. Me, Davi, Diego, and Connor, 3 Scottish friends who had been living there for a long time and already considered themselves half Brazilian. On the agreed day, we set off full of enthusiasm, without much worry. The road was clear, the car stereo was at full volume, laughter, jokes. The plan was simple. Drive about 5 hours, find a place to sleep, and continue on our journey in the morning. The problem was that we hadn't booked any hotels. We arrived late and everything was full. Not a single inn had a vacancy. After driving around without success, we pulled over to the side of the road. What now? I asked. Diego suggested, we'll sleep in the car. Then Davi pointed to an abandoned gas station. Over there, it looks peaceful. We parked in a dark corner. The place was macabre. No attendant, rusty pumps, a streetlight flickering every now and then. But we were so tired that we reclined the seats to try to sleep. David went out to urinate. A few minutes later, he came running back, pale-faced, and opened the door, shouting, "Start the car now!" Before we knew it, we saw a man emerge from the bushes, walking quickly, staring straight at us. My heart raced. I accelerated the car, screeching away. "What happened?" Connor shouted. David was shaking. I thought there was a fight, but the guy was stabbing another man, and he saw me. My stomach churned. Panicked, I glanced in the rearview mirror. A car was coming up behind us. Its headlights were getting closer and closer. We sped up, but we weren't fast enough. The car hit us from behind, a blow that shook everything. It hit again, harder, and we lost control. The car spun and flipped several times. Everything was spinning. Sounds of metal crumpling, glass shattering, until we came to a stop upside down. I woke up with pain all over my body, my head throbbing, and the taste of blood in my mouth. Diego was bleeding, Connor was moaning, but we were alive. We struggled to get out. The smell of oil permeated the air. I looked down the road. The other car had disappeared. A woman eventually found us and called the police. At the hospital, we found out what had happened. The killer was a businessman involved in fraud who had killed a former partner. When David stumbled upon the scene, he decided to eliminate the witness. Our dream trip turned into a nightmare. Even though we survived, we never trust quiet places on the road again. And every time I pass an abandoned gas station, I step on the gas. Don't want to miss the next spine-chilling stories? Subscribe to the channel now and join our community of horror fans. Story 7. Hello everyone. This story happened to me when I was still a drummer in a band. I was always on the road, playing in bars, concert halls and festivals. It was a tough routine, but I loved it. I never considered myself a scaredy cat. When people told stories about ghosts on the road, I thought it was just because I was tired until what I experienced one night. I was driving towards the interior of Minas Gerais, almost 10 at night. The road was empty, with no lighting, and the fog was thick enough to scare me. I had driven a lot and knew the reputation of that stretch. Silent, dark, and full of rumors about strange things. I stared into the darkness for a while until I reached an old concrete bridge over a dark river. The fog was even thicker there, and with every meter I went, I wondered if it would be safe to continue. In the middle of that fog, on the edge of the bridge, there was someone standing. A motionless figure watching me. I couldn't see if it was a man or a woman, just a silhouette. My body froze instantly. I blinked, hoping it was an illusion, but it was still there, staring at my car. I drove past, but looked in the rearview mirror, and the figure was still there. Seconds later, it disappeared without a trace. I arrived at the bar where I would play, trying to ignore the shiver that wouldn't leave me. But the discomfort wouldn't go away. I told my bandmates, who laughed, saying that I was just tired. Then, one of the waitresses who heard my story stopped and asked me, "Which bridge?" I answered, "The Ponte do Lago Seco, the one before I got here." She turned pale. "Have you seen Clara?" she said in a whisper. I was speechless. She said that Clara had committed suicide there about 20 years ago after being abandoned by her fiancé. Many people swore they saw her on foggy nights, always standing in the same spot, as if she was still waiting for something or someone. A gentleman at the counter confirmed it. He had seen her once, too. I felt a chill. The waitress added, "If you saw her, it's because she wanted to be seen." The words echoed in my head. The rest of the night was hard to face. On the way back, I crossed the bridge without looking to either side, praying that I would arrive safely. I never forgot the serious expression on the waitress's face or Clara's story. Whether it was really her ghost or the result of my fear, I don't know. But every time I pass that bridge, I feel an inexplicable chill, and I'd rather not risk looking in the rearview mirror again.